Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of Superannuated Starman. I want to start this episode off by saying happy birthday, Cory.
Happy birthday.
How young are we today?
Sir, I'm timeless. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, so he's not answering, but that is the voice of Cory Braucks, who has a birthday this month. So if you're out there, wish him a happy birthday on Twitter, on the Discord. And then my other co-host, as always, Chris Duerksen. Chris, how are you doing?
Not too bad. You know, my birthday was like the last episode.
Didn't I say something?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday for everybody. As myself, my birthday is still a few months away, but I'm Sean Ryan and I'm your host. Cory, why don't you tell everybody what game we're covering today?
We're covering McDonald's Treasureland Adventure.
This episode has been a long time coming. Cory has specifically chosen this month because not only is he celebrating his birthday, but McDonald's Treasureland Adventure officially turns 30, and our podcast will be 2 years old as of September 20th. So I've said before, hey, go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes. I listened to our first episode yesterday. Guys, it's objectively bad. We have come a very long way. So if you want to check them out, but our shows have progressed so much more than I could have possibly imagined it would.
Wait, what was the first episode? Was that Super Mario World?
It was Super Mario World.
Oh my goodness.
It's not great. It's rough to listen to. The mic quality is bad. The structure and format of our show. In fact, before I even start into the history segment on that episode, you can hear me take a very audible gulp, like I'm about to present in front of some very important people. I'm a mess in that show. Before we jump into our next segment, let's take a break, and when we return, we're going to discuss the history of McDonald's Treasureland Adventure.
Enjoy these bangers.
Developed by Treasure and published by Sega, McDonald's Treasureland Adventure was released on the 23rd of September in Japan, October in PAL territories, and December of 1993 in North America. I'm going to refer to McDonald's Treasureland Adventure simply as Treasureland for the remainder of the segment, and likely the rest of the show. I'm trying to simplify things, but there's bound to be some confusion because the company that developed the game was Treasure. Founded in 1992, Treasure approached Sega for a publishing contract for a game concept they had already begun development on. However, lacking a proven track record, Sega denied the contract for the original game and instead commissioned them to develop Treasureland. Treasure's president, Masato Magawa, accepted this deal, realizing that by completing this game, he would be establishing a working relationship with Sega and would likely be able to secure funding for future titles. Several months into development on Treasureland, Sega granted approval, and the original game, later to be named Gunstar Heroes, was now in development alongside Treasureland. And to break from the history for a second, if you haven't heard our Gunstar Heroes episode, go and check it out. That game was fantastic. That episode was amazing. So it's definitely worth listening to. Back to the history. With a small company of roughly 18 people, it meant that both games shared staff members, with several people performing multiple duties. Regardless of his status as president of the company, Masato Magawa served as both a producer and programmer for Treasureland. Koichi Kimura also served a dual role as the director and lead artist. Last but not least, Katsuhiko Suzuki was a composer for the project. Realizing just how much was riding on the success of this game, Masato Magawa mandated that the game had to be faithful and respectful to the McDonald's licensing and characters. In a time when good licensed video games were few and far between, Treasureland surprised consumers and critics alike. One reviewer was particularly fond of its vibrant colors and attention to detail. Another impressed with the game's presentation and soundtrack for staying in tune with the theme and design. However, the game did receive some criticism for its shorter length and easy gameplay. Treasureland was released on an 8 megabit cart, first in Japan. The game was promoted in 1,000 McDonald's restaurants in the country, with Sega forecasting sales over 500,000 copies. The North American version replaces the tribesmen enemies in the First World with robots, presumably to avoid African American stereotypes. The European version is noted for being more difficult than the other regions, with the player beginning with less health and enemies requiring more damage to defeat. Were you about to say something, Chris?
Oh no, the idea of having tribesmen, that's super cringy.
Still in 1993, that was definitely a thing. And when it comes to Japan, they're not exactly great when it comes to racial sensitivity.
Hey, and y'all, if you didn't listen to our last episode, we were talking about the issues with the symbols of Islam.
Yeah.
Totally spaced on that.
Say what, Corey? We can barely hear you.
Said I totally spaced on that. I forgot we were just talking about that.
Yeah,
Do better, Japan.
It's definitely been a long running problem with a lot of Japanese developers. But they did at least fix it in the North American version.
And to be fair, you don't hear about any of that stuff in games anymore. So,
I mean,
different era. Do you really?
I mean, it's not as bad, but I remember Uncharted had a bunch of backlash for him killing a bunch of minorities constantly. It was just Nathan Drake kills people of color for 4 hours. The game.
It's definitely a problem, but we're talking about McDonald's, so
Yeah, this is wholesome and fun. Okay, don't worry about it.
bringing it back to the game, our story begins with Ronald McDonald walking through the magical forest when he stumbles upon a scrap of paper at the base of a large tree. After examining the piece of paper, he concludes that it's a portion of a treasure map that had been torn into 4 pieces. Ronald decides to pursue the remaining pieces by following the trail as far as his piece of the map will lead him. The journey will take him through the game's 4 worlds: the magical forest, magical town, magical sea, and magical moon, each of which is divided into 3 stages, culminating with a boss that he must defeat to gain the next piece of the map. Armed with a magical attack that sends out a wave of stars and a scarf he uses as a grappling hook, Ronald must traverse through each world to find one of his friends in these levels that can provide him with tips for defeating that stage's boss. Throughout the stages, Ronald will collect jewels as well as flowers to replace his health. Additionally, he can collect bags of gold that can be used in stores for certain levels. These stores sell a variety of items, including additional jewels, power-ups that increase the strength of his magic attack, and balloons that allow him to safely glide over enemies and obstacles. The following year, in 1994, Sega contracted Japanese video game developer Sims to port the game to the Sega Game Gear. The entire game was significantly reduced in scope, with numerous changes to the story, levels, and gameplay. Only released in Japan, Donald Known Magical World, or Donald in the Magical World when translated to English, is a very rare and highly sought after collector's item, with loot carts going around for $150 and complete listings selling for over 600. Lastly, in 2021, an Easter egg, if you want to call it that, was discovered after staying hidden for nearly 30 years. On the title screen.
In this game?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think Cory showed this to me.
Yeah.
On the main title screen, enter the password menu and input the following password using the symbols balloon, ruby, M, and clown. Press start 3 times until you hear an explosion sound, then quickly hold up and left. The McDonald's sign sprite will change into a 3D model. Not only that, but the creepy noise you're hearing right now plays in the background until you reset your console. That same noise is used in the Magical Moon stage right before Ronald is grabbed by robotic hands and carried into the ship. But in the game, that noise only lasts for a couple seconds, and the longer you hear it, the more creepy it becomes. There's some speculation as to why the developers implemented this, with one theory revolving around the idea that in the beta version of the game, McDonald's french fries and hamburgers were featured in the game, but McDonald's Corporation forced them to change the sprites to jewels and flowers that we see today. I'm going to quote an article that I found. The founder of Treasure, Masato Magawa, claimed that Spike motivated the team to include a way to make the Sega logo explode, but this doesn't seem to have been implemented. That said, an explosion sound is heard when entering the inputs for the 3D Tech demo, so it's possible the team funneled their spike that way. I did play the Japanese beta, and I can confirm that french fries and hamburgers are present in the game, and that code that I previously mentioned does not work, as some of the inputs are different in the password menu. Another interesting tidbit, the Treasure logo is different in the beta version, with the final release using the same one that's used in Gunstar Heroes. And I can confirm that the code that I mentioned previously does in fact work on real hardware. And aside from its creepy nature, it is incredibly impressive for what it is. When we come back, we're going to hear from the birthday boy himself and listen to his memories, so enjoy some more music from McDonald's Treasureland Adventure. Cory, Chris and I don't have any memories of this game, so this entire segment is going to be all on you. So why don't you tell us some of your memories of this game?
Do you not have any memories because you're not cool? Is that why this is an issue?
If that's what you want to tell yourself.
In
That's what I
1993,
tell myself.
I did not own a Sega Genesis, and if I had seen this game, this is not something that I would have picked out for myself.
Yeah, this would have gone right under the radar.
Because
Oh,
Over the
I'm
radar.
I'm almost certain this is something that I did not pick out for myself. I think this is something that my mother brought home. Did you guys even know about this game? Like, that's the question.
Nope. Didn't
Yeah,
even
like,
know about it. So yeah,
I don't even know how. Like, did
had
we
no
cover
idea.
how many units this sold?
I can't find the number of sold through copies for this game, but I assume it's pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, I really am not sure like how popular a title this was, and it is like it's a weird niche kind of port, I guess. Like it you don't really think of like McDonald's as like a crazy like video game franchise, It's just like one of those weird things of cross promotion back in the day. But it was surprisingly good. Even as a kid, I remember like having a lot of fun with this, and like this is probably the first video game I can recall like ever beating, and it's something that I played through like several times, and it was just this vibrant and colorful, like wonderful, like just fun little adventure game. And it wasn't
So
too difficult, like
was this
especially
one
for a
the
kid.
was this one of your first Sega games that you had?
I don't remember like where it falls in the purchase history. I just know that I had this like fascination with it because it was just something like just fun and exciting to play, and like it had relatable characters because we all know like the McDonald's franchise, and it had really good music, and it's just a really well made game. So
Yeah,
even
yeah,
though
it
it is like
really is. It's
Yeah, it's even though it is like just a shameless advertisement for McDonald's, like it's really well put together.
Yeah, the platforming and the controls and everything, just especially like as for a kid game, is just surprisingly solid.
Yeah, and like the audio's not bad. Like the audio's really good, and the difficulty curve is not bad at all. I mean, like as an adult, it's really simple to play through. But like even like as a kid, this is something where like if you get hit, you don't die immediately, and pitfalls are an instant kill. But if you have like a balloon power up, instead of falling to your death in a pit, like you get to float upwards with this balloon. So it was just something like really easy to play as a child. And I recall like just it was engaging and fun and colorful. And I remember spending like a lot of hours and like a lot of summers playing through it. And it was really like super wholesome too, because like you really don't kill any of like the bosses. Like Ronald McDonald like makes friends with everybody, and it's
Hmm.
just this like super like happy fun time adventure where like you can't really be sad while playing it.
There was something that you said a little bit ago that I kind of want to go back to, and you talked about how recognizable the franchise characters are, or should I say were, because in 1993 there was Birdie, there were the Fry Kids, there was the
Right.
Hamburglar, but kids today have no idea who they are.
Right, and I mean that's very indicative of the era as well. And this is this is pre like McDonald's rebranding. If you go to McDonald's nowadays, like they're very modern space age looking kind of buildings where they're all like one big square and they all have this kind of like weird brown, brick pastel color to them with the tile and everything. And back in the 90s and like 80s and everything, McDonald's was this colorful wonderland. Like I'm sure even now like people can still see like the McDonald's play places everywhere, and there's like the, ball pit and the slides and everything, and there's color everywhere. And like back in the 90s, you had like chairs that were shaped like hamburgers, and there was a lot of like crazy
Yeah.
pastel colors everywhere. And like they had this big franchise of characters. You had Ronald McDonald, but you also had the Hamburglar, you had Birdie, you had Grimace, like you had Mayor McCheese and the the Fry Guys, and there was just this like crazy adventure of marketable characters where McDonald's really pushing to like advertise towards children basically. And it was this kind of like fun family friendly atmosphere. And I think a lot of that changed in like the early 2000s when they started pushing back against like the whole like obesity epidemic and blaming McDonald's for like making kids fat. And they had like the whole thing where you couldn't get things like supersized anymore. It was just like small, medium, and large. And like, because back in the day in the 90s and like the 80s and stuff, like all your restaurants had like small, medium, large, and then like the mega death size, where it's like Wendy's had like biggie size fries, and McDonald's you could supersize me and all that sort of stuff. Where
Would you
they've
like that
really cut
supersized
back.
for
Yeah,
49 cents?
exactly. Like they've really cut back on a lot of that, and they really don't advertise anymore either. So a lot of it is it's very like corporate and very clean cut to not piss anybody off.
I think that this is something that I probably would have enjoyed if I was playing it as a kid, but like I said, it's probably not something that I would have gone out of my way to ask for. But it is such a great game, and I kind of feel like I missed out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I didn't ask for this as a child. I'm pretty sure like my mother just picked it up because that's what happened when you were a child. Like your parents would dig through the Walmart like $5 bin or whatever for discount games and just bring home stuff. And this was definitely one of those titles where someone put this in front of me at some point, was like, "Here you go." And it was just such a surprisingly well done game, and it's super fun and super colorful and just a really enjoyable experience all around.
And talking about McDonald's back in the day, I can remember when they had Nintendo 64s like lined up on the
Yes.
wall.
So
Yeah.
my
That's
wife
the first place
actually
I played
told me
Excite Bike
that I was supposed to
64.
bring that up. So I was told to bring that up as first pop culture. So I'm glad that you reminded me.
I've actually got some photos of it, but I'll post those later. But there's something, because this section is going to be very, very short if it's just you talking. There's something that I want to talk about today, a recent McDonald's video game that was released to celebrate Grimace's 52nd birthday. The company teamed up with Cruel Toys to develop a Game Boy Color game for Grimace. In
Game Boy
fact,
Color?
Game Boy Color, if you go to grimacesbirthday.com, they even made a website that is supposed to look like throwback websites from the era like Angel Fire and GeoCities or
No
Geocities.
way.
Yes. The game is called Grimace's Birthday, and you can play it. It's a full game that you can play through a Game Boy emulator.
Do they sell the physical copies of it too?
No,
Oh,
it is just a ROM that you can play on your emulator.
crazy.
I'm on there right now, and there's like a little, like you said, it was like an Angel Fire, like a GeoCities webpage. It says, "Have you seen this man?" It's a picture of the Hamburglar, and he could say yes or "I'm not telling," and I said yes, and it just said thanks. Look, it's
I
this good
voted I'm not
information
telling.
to you.
Yeah, to celebrate Grimace's 52nd birthday, they decided to just publish a Game Boy Color game. What kind of wild marketing is that? Because nobody knows about this.
I don't think were they even advertising this website in any of their stores, or are they just doing this?
They just kind of did it. Is there anything else you want to mention about your memories of this game before we move on to our replay?
No, I mean, like I said, I think this was, one of the first titles that I can remember beating. And I remember being in love with the visuals and with the music and just spending a lot of like summer vacations playing this. And it was just this really fun, like just fanciful title. And it has a special place in my heart. So,
Did it make you want to buy McDonald's?
no, not really. I mean, like, I actually ate a lot of Burger King more as a child because McDonald's used to do the like the cut up onions on the underside of the bun, and I did not like having the diced onions as a kid. So,
I'm with you on that one. All that said, let's take another break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss our replay of playing this game 25 years later. Stick around.
Well, hey, to kick this off, I just want to thank the birthday boy for bugging us to play this game because I never would have thought of playing it. I never would have checked it out. This would have stayed completely off the radar. And to be honest, I enjoyed playing it. Like, I actually I didn't geek out, but like, there were times I was messaging you guys while I was playing this, going, "Hey, like, I'm actually really enjoying this game," because as we all know, like, I don't spend a whole lot of time um, playing these in-depth games, so this was kind of right up my alley. And it is just a simple, well done platforming, colorful, bright, cheery game. And I really can't stress how well done it is. It's not janky at all. The physics feel good. The jumping feels good. Like the enemies attacks make sense and everything. Like the everything about this game was kind of on point, which really caught me off guard because it's a McDonald's game. And one of my favorite things that I was going to mention was if you stand still long enough and Ronald's little board animation, he makes the little McDonald's symbol that they used to do
He
in the
does the
commercials back in the
golden
90s.
Yeah,
arches.
the
Uh-huh.
arches.
Yeah, I thought that was just such a nice touch. I figured you guys would go into bigger detail, but I mean that's my first initial impressions. Like the levels were great. Did you guys want to go into level by level or anything like that, or?
I did not take notes for level by level, which
I did
is
not either. I figured Cory would bring it up.
I mean, I really don't enjoy talking level by level because I think it kind of distracts from the overall picture. You can mention like specific things and talk about like how you enjoyed things or your particular favorites or whatever.
Well, but I suppose before we do that, I will wrap up my enjoyment by mentioning like this game was just a total nostalgia throwback where it just reminded me of. I never played this as a kid, but this totally would have fit right in with being babysat by like an aunt or an uncle, and like this would have been like one of the random games that they had in their collection, and just sitting on the floor and just playing it. Just like this was just such a perfect. What did you say, 93? Like this is a great snapshot of 93, even though it's a McDonald's game, which I know I keep saying that, but it still blows my mind because it's freaking McDonald's. Like that's just this is not Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario or like it's freaking Ronald McDonald. How weird is that? And for it to be good.
I just realized my math is off. I said 25 years later. It's actually been 30 years since this came out.
Oh yeah,
Which
yeah, it is 30 years.
so I was telling these guys off air, I bought an actual cart of this off of eBay. I was like, you know what? I want to do this real authentically because I still have I just recently got a hold of a Sega Genesis. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this all for real. But the cart didn't work. And I tried to return it to the guy and he refused. So I escalated it with eBay and I was like, hey, I'm trying to get my money back. I want to return this. They reached out to the seller. I reached out to the seller. Eventually, I got my money back and I got to keep the cart. So I tried to get a legitimate copy, but I didn't. So I did emulate it because I have an EverDrive. So I feel like my conscience is clear when it comes to replaying this game. And
Kudos.
before you even start the game, there's a lot of options for the player. You can select the difficulty between beginner, normal, and expert, and you can select your control scheme. So even though it's only a 3-button game, they offer you the ability to decide what you want each of the ABC buttons to do.
Which I thought was very considerate of them.
I wish Nintendo would do that now, today.
Yeah. I
But
wish
they don't.
every game does that.
The
Dude, I'm telling
manual,
you, like Treasure put in a lot of work for this like franchise adaptation of a video game.
here's my thoughts on that. And this is kind of skipping ahead mentally from what I was going to say. Okay, so you already mentioned the game is very vibrant and colorful. The animation is very impressive. And if anything, it reminds me of something that'd be on like the TurboGrafx 16, like Magical Chase or Fantasy Zone, if you've ever played those games. If you haven't, no big deal. But it just looks like it's well beyond what it should be doing on a Sega Genesis. And as far as the game itself, when we're talking about just the characters, I think that if you replaced Ronald and his friends with a brand new character, this game would have probably benefited from it.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
I think that the McDonald's branding was actually a detriment to this game's legacy because it's such a good game. The
Yeah,
game itself is fantastic.
yeah, and by making McDonald's, everybody's just going to brush off like what we would have as kids. Like nobody's
Exactly
going to
my
look at
point.
McDonald's game and be like, "Oh yeah, let me check that out." Like they're just going to be like, "It's a McDonald's game." Have I
Yeah,
mentioned that it's a McDonald's game? I
like
keep
my
mentioning.
parents bought me games as a kid that were Disney games. So this very well could have been something they would have bought me, but I wouldn't have sought this out.
Oh my god! Like you took the words out of my mouth. Like this game felt like it. Like Mickey Mouse would have been perfect in this game.
Well, there's a lot of Disney games from back in the day that were outstanding games. Well, we played a couple of them, DuckTales being
Played
one.
DuckTales, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was a fantastic
And
game.
Aladdin.
Yeah, a lot of great games. And these licensed games typically suck. If you remember LJN, that did a lot of early Nintendo games like the X-Men for NES or oh god,
Yes.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, licensed games for Nintendo.
Were
You
typically bad.
Yeah, you used to get I loved X-Men as a kid. And I got my hopes up so high for every game that they came out, any Marvel game that they came out with. And like they were just a guaranteed way for you to get your hopes up and then just be instantly disappointed. And like all the good games were like brand new characters, like
But this was definitely a good game. The gameplay
yeah.
is solid. Ronald is easy to control. The character actions are very responsive. I think that it's a lot of fun using his scarf as a grappling hook. And I thought it was I wanted to mention earlier when you were talking about giving us little updates. I loved hearing your updates, especially the one where you discovered that the scarf could be adjusted.
Come on, like I was not for such. I mean, it's a simple, clean game, and we mentioned like you can customize the controls, but they even put in the thought of making it so that way you can. The scarf that's coming out, it's not like a winter scarf. It is a magician's scarf, like a string of
Yeah,
scarves
like
coming
you
out of
would
a
see
sleeve.
from a clown or a
Yes,
magician.
exactly.
Like, yeah, it's
So
it's a knotted up scarf of like various colors.
yeah, so by default, the scarf comes out of his hand and it's one scarf long, and it's like the red scarf.
Yeah,
And then I had no
really
idea
fun
when
during the
you're
game.
hanging on to it, you can go up and down the D-pad and lengthen how many scarves are coming out down to 3 scarves. And then if you let go, the next time you go to use your scarf, it's 3 scarves long instead of just one. And I just thought that I got halfway through the game before I figured that out. And it just caught me off guard because it's just such a nice thought that they put into the game to do that. And it's just so unique and such a great way of doing that. It was noteworthy for me.
Well,
So
like Corey said, Treasure put so much effort into this game, which makes so much sense when you think about it historically, because so much was riding on this. If this game had sucked, maybe Gunstar Heroes wouldn't have ever existed.
Well, and I think we talked about that during the Gunstar Heroes episode where this was supposed to actually come out before Gunstar Heroes, and they managed to bargain their way into releasing this, I think, like 2 weeks after they released Gunstar Heroes, so their flagship
Yep.
game wasn't like a franchise title.
McDonald's, yeah.
Yeah.
But now having played this, because at the time when we played the Gunstar Heroes episode, I had not played this game. But having played it now, I don't think it would have been that big a deal if this was their first game. Because it's great. It's honestly a great game.
I probably haven't touched this game in like, I don't know, close to 20 years now.
I was just about to ask if you made your wife play it.
No, no, no.
You
My
should.
original title is like up in my parents' attic 800 miles away, so I had to use an emulator, obviously. But, I sat down and played this thing for the first time in I don't know how long, and it
How
still
good
holds
was that
up. Like,
nostalgia trip?
it was just such a fun exciting, wonderful thing, and it really made me smile like the whole time. And like I have no regrets about bringing it up to you guys. Like this still
Yeah.
is what I remember as like
Now,
a kid.
now I have to ask because you have been just if this is your first episode, he brings this game up constantly,
I've
all the time,
mentioned it at the end
on
credits on at least like 6 different episodes.
on the air, off the air. He's always talking about this game. Now, were you doing that ironically?
Yeah, pretty much. Because like I remember have like wonderful childhood memories of this, but I'm like it can't be as fun as it was like as a a 6-year-old or whatever. And
Because
it is. It's still just like a fun, fanciful little title, and I love it.
I legitimately thought every time you were mentioning that, I'm like, okay, we're gonna be playing this game, and he's just gonna be laughing at us, like for making us play
Oh
this
yeah,
silly
Yeah.
game.
like I was
I thought
stuck
you were
with this or
trolling
whatever.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I thought you were trolling us, and it actually turned out like
yeah.
this was right up
It's
my
such a
alley.
great
Of
game.
yeah, I'm
And
totally showing this game to Gibson.
like Sean, you were talking about the beginning. People were criticizing it for like the length and everything. It's probably like a
It
good
is perfect.
hour. It's like an hour-long title if you're like an adult. So it was probably somewhere around like a 2 or 3 hour mark as a kid where you're dying occasionally. So like I don't
And
understand what
it's got the password system.
yeah, and
So
it's got a password system, and it has like 3 main acts or whatever, but each one of those acts has probably like 4 different levels that are all very different in design.
There's four.
yeah.
There's four different worlds.
Yeah, so there's 4 worlds, and each one of those worlds has like probably 3 or 4 levels apiece. So there's like 12 stages minimum. It's like it's a really like it's a pretty good length game. Like I don't see why anyone would really complain about this, considering you can speed run Metroid in like 19 minutes, and that's
Well, I was gonna,
relatively close to the era.
and that's one thing I was thinking about. Like, because this came out in '93, at that point, Super Mario World was already out,
I
and
mean,
Super Mario World is a very long game with save
right? It's
states,
also
and
like an RPG too, or not an RPG, but like a really long like adventure series.
right, and so I mean, I can see how people would complain about the length of this game because everything else that was successful at the time were games
But
were becoming longer at the
But it's
time.
not like, but Sonic was released in this era. Sonic's like a 45-minute title. Like, I don't see how you can make a complaint like that.
I see it as that the Sega Genesis was really all about bringing the arcade home. And I think that a lot of titles on the Genesis really geared themselves for that shorter time spent. You weren't
Right.
there's so many arcade games and so many sports games on the Sega Genesis
Not to
as
mention like fighters and side scrollers and stuff.
yeah, I think that the length is just something that they had to bring something up,
Yeah,
something negative about the game, because there's so much positive to say about this. When it comes to negatives, the only negative I really have for it is that the music isn't great, but it's not awful. It very much fits.
There's a lot of bangers in this that I really enjoy listening to.
Well, the music very much fits the theme of the worlds, but it doesn't really fit anything else.
Oh yeah, it's nothing you would like put on in the background or something.
So little of this game makes sense, but I guess because it doesn't make sense, that makes sense.
Are you
Because
telling me that the magical forest land that Ronald McDonald goes through is not what you envisioned in your head?
it's not. But anything true to life to McDonald's would be boring as hell. And that's probably why they took out stuff like hamburgers and french fries.
Yeah,
But
there's
who
no
who
there's no
knows?
fast food references here. Like it's he's wandering around like shooting, sparkles out of his hands at like weird alien guys with unicorn horns. It's like Grimace's alter ego is what you fight in the first stage.
and this
That
is
that giant
such a
tomato?
Yeah, the first boss is a giant tomato.
Yeah, that's like the only food in the game. Sorry, Chris, I cut you off. What were you about to say?
oh no, now I'm just thinking about that too because I can't think of any food at all. But no, I was gonna say like everything in this game is just so wholesome. I mean, it definitely is geared towards like 6 to 8 year olds, and like this was like the same kind of like everything in this game is what you would expect on in a coloring like if you were to sit down in a restaurant and get the little pack of crayons and have the coloring placemat.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a game designed for precious children.
yeah,
But be that as it may, like, you're talking about how well designed it is. Like, the platforming is really well done.
oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I have no
No,
issues with like character hitboxes. Like, everything was programmed like incredibly well in the
yeah,
series.
and I even thought that like the something I haven't seen in other games. So we talked about how Ronald his life bar it's made up of like what 8 jewels if you're on beginner
Yeah.
mode.
Well, it
And
starts at like 4, and you can keep picking up power ups that increase
right,
it.
yeah, yeah, exactly, which is really cool because yeah, you can increase how much health you have, but each time you lose a health, there are 3 different ways to replenish it, 3 separate independent ways to replenish a jewel, which is I thought was really kind of neat. And
Well,
yeah, I mean, it makes it very easy and very player friendly, but it's also it's unique. And I hadn't seen this in any other type of game. And what I'm talking about here is like if you lose a jewel, you can either refill it by just straight up picking up another jewel, like from an enemy or from or buying one from the store, or there's these flowers that you can pick up, 2 different color flowers. One flower is basically the equivalent of half a jewel, and the other color flower is a third of a jewel, where it takes 3 of these
they're
one flowers. Yeah,
white and gold, like, or they're like white and orange, like what would you call them, like magnolias or something? Like
yeah, just
they're little happy
cartoony.
flowers.
Yeah,
Yeah, just random
exactly.
flower.
But the fact that they are independent from each other, which means so you have your life bar, and then next to it you have your orange flower collection, which 2 orange ones will disappear and give you an extra jewel, and then next to that is your 3 flower collection, and you can see exactly like you can see your inventory of flowers and jewels and everything all at the same time. It's just a really fun way
Well,
just to keep refilling your
and
health.
so, like, what a thing to talk about the power ups. So you have 7 jewels maximum. You have these like fabulous red jewels, and then, like you said, you have 2 orange flowers and 2 white flowers, and or 3 white
3.
flowers, and then you also have like silver and gold bags of money, which is like a currency in the game, and you have the McDonald's logo, which is your extra life, or your continues rather, and you have the Ronald McDonald logo, which is your extra life, and then you have the jewels, which increases your maximum jewel count if you're not already maxed out. And then you have sparkles, which is like increasing your magical damage, like to kill things quicker. And you have balloons, which, like, if you fall into a pit, they will make you float back up, and then you can fly through the air and control yourself, which is a great way to get through the train level, by the way.
That's
So, like,
exactly what I
there's a
did.
lot of power ups, and then because you're picking up these bags of like money throughout the game, there are these little stores that pop up, probably a couple times per act or like whatever, even per level. There's at least one per level usually. And you can buy all of these power-ups in the level. Like,
Yeah,
so you can go into the store and buy everything, or I don't know if you guys went into more than one store, but if you did, you'll
it's the
find
Tetris
that
game.
there's a Tetris game.
Yeah.
And so
Columns.
yeah,
It's columns.
you can play columns, and then if you match enough of the same thing, like, so if you're trying to get like balloons and you get 3 in a row, and then you get it 3 times, you get a free balloon power up. So for the price of 2,000 Ronald McDonald gold, you can end up playing like this game of columns and getting a bunch of power ups for essentially 2,000 gold.
Yeah, you
Where
can
normally,
save
like,
money. Yeah.
yeah, normally balloons cost like 10K. So if you get like 3 balloon power ups, you get 30,000 gold worth of power ups for only 2,000 gold. So it's another like fun little way to just be like, here's extra stuff, and it's a lot of fun, and you get to play a little mini game for it.
One thing that you mentioned a little bit ago, Chris, you were talking about how unique this game is. One really unique aspect that I liked a lot was you get hints from your friends, and the first one being the Hamburglar, that gives you a hint that the boss will take away a portion of your life in the form of one of those jewels. They will eat it. That is the only way to make them temporarily vulnerable to your attack, which I thought was such an awesome mechanic for a video game because I
Yes.
don't remember
Yeah. I
seeing that
didn't.
at all.
Yeah. In order to make the boss vulnerable, you have to lose part of your life. So weird.
And then you have
And
to, if you're getting low at health, you have to beat up the little ads that he spawns periodically during the fight to keep yourself alive.
yeah. And speaking of some of the boss, I mean, can we talk about some of the boss fights that I thought were really cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just kind of talking about anything and everything.
Dude, so there's the one boss that has the door thing. I don't even know how to describe it.
The alien at the end.
Yeah, I thought that was such a cool boss fight with a weird mechanic because this boss fight are 3 levels and you cannot jump past through the levels. In order to get from top to the bottom or to the middle, you have to go through a door that matches the door that you're aiming for on whatever level that you want to go to. And every 5 seconds, these doors shuffle up.
Yeah, it's
So
like
you're
Russian
constantly
roulette.
Yeah. So you're constantly having to double check where your target door is and what door you're about to go through. And meanwhile, the boss is also taking these doors, changing what level he's on to shoot you, which is it's super easy to run away from him. But in order for him, like I said, or like we said, in order for him to take damage, he every once in a while he stops and like does like his little tractor beam where he's like wanting to suck in one of your jewels. So you have to line it up so you're above him so he can suck in one of your jewels and then take a door to get on the same level as him and then hit him while he's vulnerable for that brief amount of time. And I just thought it's like one of the most
And
strange and unique boss fights I've ever done.
if you aren't fast enough, the doors will start to shuffle again, and you'll be stuck on the same floor as him. And
And
he
he'll get you
shoots
with
you with
fireballs.
fireballs. Yeah, because he's
Yeah.
got a magic like fireball wand or whatever
And
that he's got.
they're ping pong fireballs that you're super lucky if you're able to dodge. Thought it was just such a cool and unique boss fight that is again noteworthy and well thought out and very unique and playful.
By the way, so speaking of friends, you end up helping Hamburglar, and you help Birdie, and you help Grimace. And Hamburglar, he asks you for 2 gems, and it's completely optional. And if you give him the 2 gems, he will tell you how to beat the first boss because he tells you about the tractor beam mechanic. And then Birdie will like open up the level for you and help you like get out of the stage that you're stuck on. Grimace, the big fatty, is just too lazy to get out from underneath the door. Okay, he's the only one of your friends who's super not helpful, and you got to bribe this Chunkosaurus to move out of the way so you can just get through the stage.
All of these stages I think are really, really interesting all by themselves. Like that first stage, the Magical Forest, really reminded me of like a Kirby game.
Yes, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was
And
just great.
and we should mention like in each stage, I don't really remember or feel like the enemies are recycled a whole lot. They're kind of unique to each level, and
The only ones that pop up again are like the Grimace wannabes, like the big fat dudes with the horn on them, and they're just recolored.
Yep.
yep,
But I think the second world, the Magical Town, has the most interesting stages, especially the train going through the tunnel, because it just kind of blanks off parts of the screen and you're just in quote unquote darkness. And I thought it was a really cool effect. But the most kind of out there stage has got to be the Magical Moon, which
I was gonna say like we have to talk about the moon.
I thought it was pretty great, but it's got this weird, like, psychedelic effect. And at the very beginning of the game, it gives you the warning for, this may trigger epilepsy in photosensitive individuals. I think I've mentioned on the show before, but I have epilepsy due to injuries that I've sustained in the army. This stage, I thought it was going to be the one. I thought it was going to happen because of how bright and flashing and chaotic everything was. I was like, oh my God, don't let this happen to me. Please. I don't want to come on the show and be like, yeah, guys, I couldn't finish the game because I had a massive seizure while playing the moon stage.
Oh,
Well, I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, me too, man. I was pretty worried about it, but I got through it and I thought it was really great. And it felt like a much more chaotic version of the moon stage for DuckTales, which we were talking about that earlier. I think this whole game is just fantastic. It's so good.
well, you want to talk about stages. So like you go from the forest, and it's just this kind of like bright sunny atmosphere, and then you start climbing up the trees, and then you kind of get into like this dark spooky section where like it's nighttime now,
Oh yeah,
And
like
then
some of the characters turn to ghosts, don't they?
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
like you
yeah, yeah.
start fighting ghosts at some point, and then like you get into this like section where like you're like running around crazy like geysers and stuff, and there's like fish in the water, and you're like kind of jumping around, and then like kind of transfer from the first stage. You end up like jumping into this huge geyser, and it's like and like you're in this like wild elevator where this like waterfall is shooting you into space, and you get launched off into another part of the map, and you end up going in like a cave complex, and it's just this like crazy intermission where like there's a bunch of power-ups flying through the sky and stuff, and it's just very colorful, and like there's stars and stuff flying in the background. It's just such a wonderful like
And I
smash
suppose
cut.
we should mention like this game, like speaking of all the variety of the levels and stuff, this game pretty much covers every trope that there were in 90s platformer games. You got your spooky haunted mansion, you got your jungle level, you got your water level, you got your moving platform levels, like
Yeah,
it's
you go
your
from
low gravity level. Like
like
it's got everything.
forest to water to like a cave system, and then the first boss is like the end of the caves because he's the big mush or the tomato man. And then after that, like you end up on a train, and it's like a circus type of thing.
Oh man.
And
Can we
then you
mention the mirrors?
yeah, and then Chris knew that he was gonna get attacked by a magic mirror, and it still freaked him out.
Yeah. That's all. That's all I was gonna
Okay.
say. It had
You
this nice.
knew what was gonna happen.
I
Sorry.
knew what was gonna.
Yeah,
I was expecting like
like
an evil Ronald to come out of the mirror,
no,
but
like
instead it was
evil
this
murder
creepy little.
jugglers came out.
Yes, it was an evil murder ICP juggler. Like it's like what, and it freaked me out.
Yeah, and then Birdie helps you break out from like the lion's cage portion of the train. And then you get on top of the train, and you end up going through like a tunnel, and it gets darker and darker, and then you have to like keep dodging like low bridges basically while you're on top of the train cars.
I brought this up in the Discord in our little bosses channel, but there was a section in the car where I took a photo of it and I sent it because I was really confused. Where you see Ronald, right? Yeah, I almost called him McDonald.
Yeah,
You see
Ronald
Ronald.
McDonald's.
He walks behind a section, and you can see little transparent blocks. I was very, very confused because I didn't believe that the Sega Genesis could handle transparency like that. Apparently, it can to a certain extent. So you can have fully transparent pixels where you can see something on the opposite side. You just can't have pixels that are like semi translucent, where you can do that on the Super Nintendo.
And I am not familiar with what certain consoles could or could not do. So when I got to this part, I just thought my game glitched out, and I literally pulled up a YouTube video to see if that's how it was supposed to look, and it is.
And I grew up with it, so it was totally normal. But yeah,
Got
you get through the sorry, Sean, you
no, no, no. I didn't have anything. Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay. Well, I was gonna say like you get through the train ride, and you end up jumping on a bunch of ballerinas that help you get across the train tracks to
Which
the
is
theme of
yeah,
Swan Lake.
again weird.
Yeah, very weird.
Doesn't make any sense.
And
But
then you get on the train, and you get to the front of the train, and the conductor is like this weird like rat with a huge top hat, and he's got sunglasses. And then you just kind of beat him up, and he drives the train off the tracks, and both of you end up falling to your doom. And then Birdie rescues you at the last second, and
and lets
the
him.
rat guy ends up like crashing into the giant pile of boxes at the end with his like ah face. And this starts the city levels.
When Sean said that nothing in this game makes sense, this is perfect 90s weird video games where
And this is where the big fat sumos are, which is probably one of my favorite things in this game.
we'll go on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why are
well,
they your favorite?
so you're walking along the street, and the sumo guys are standing on like traffic lights for some reason, and they go "Bruh!" and then they like slam their feet on the ground, and it causes the terrain to go up and down like an earthquake just happened, so it splits the terrain beneath you. and then they stomp again to like level out the street. And you can shoot them, and they make like the most disgusting face ever. They're just like,
How?
"Bleh."
So Corey, you played this as a kid. Sean, how long did you spend shooting the sumo guys, waiting, expecting them to die or disappear?
Only like
And
twice.
okay, see, I sat there. I'm like, I shot one like 30 times. I'm like, why isn't he dying?
I shot one as a child several times to try to get it to die, and then afterwards I just kept shooting him just for the face that he makes.
This game is so great, and there's so much to say about it, but I don't know where we really go from here. We've talked about basically every level and how we feel about it, and the colors and the sound and the actions. Is there anything else you guys can think of before we move on to our final thoughts?
Did you
No,
ever think we'd be talking about a Ronald McDonald game?
No, 2 years ago, when we decided to do this, I never imagined that this would be one of the games that we discussed.
you'd enjoy it of all things.
Yeah, more than enjoy.
Yeah.
I, this is something
This,
that, well, I'll save it.
yeah,
I'll save it for my
yeah,
final
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say these are all final thoughts.
Well, I just want to quickly say, like, there's three bosses before you get to like the alien at the end of the game. And the three bosses that have the three treasure map pieces, you have the giant tomato man who's in like the sewer complex or like the cave worlds or whatever. And then in the city levels, you have this like alien goblin spaceship, and you're fighting like this automated green goblin where you're fighting on top of balloons, and you have to shoot him from there. And then when you blow up the hang glider, a little goblin creature falls out and he's very sad, and to cheer him up, Ronald gives him some gems to make him happy. And then you get to like the island stages where you fight a giant pair of lips with a like a pirate captain hat and a body, and that's a really weird boss fight. And then you beat him up, and then you go into outer space for like the last fight, and it's very very crazy, like acid trip experience for everything involved. So this game is just wild.
Very.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and let's listen to some more music from this great game. Welcome back, everybody. This is our last section with our final thoughts on the game. I think that anybody experienced in platformers should immediately crank up the difficulty on this game. But if you want to just have a very leisurely stroll, pick the beginner and just go and play it because it's so fun. The game is clearly designed for children, but the gameplay is creative and interesting enough to hold my attention. And it felt like I was constantly blowing my mind in slow motion because every few minutes there was something that was new and unique and creative enough that I couldn't believe that it was happening in this game. Knowing what we know now that Gunstar Heroes was in development at the same time, they could have just treated this like any other developers treated licensed games and just made a cash grab, but they didn't. It's a solid game, and I'd say that it's an amazing game, especially when compared to other licensed titles of its time period. I probably won't go back to this because I don't have the nostalgia for it, but it is something that I would absolutely recommend to somebody that wanted to maybe show their kids retro games from back in the day. Corey, I can absolutely understand why this has a special place in your heart. Chris, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, I completely agree with you. I'm still completely dumbfounded with how good this game is. Like, because yeah, I keep saying it's a McDonald's. It's a freaking McDonald's game. I'm like, their food is not this good. Why is this game this good? Such a great platformer. It's yeah. If you crank it, if you go from beginner to expert, it is the difficulty is good enough to actually challenge you. But like on beginner mode, like this is a perfect game. Like Gibbs is still very much new to video games, and he's still very much getting into stuff. Like he would enjoy this game, and I definitely plan on showing him this game, and I'm sure he will enjoy it, or he'll get creeped out that it's Ronald McDonald. But it's a good game, so yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. It is unique enough and full of surprises and twists as far as like mechanics back then. I mean, like the story is stupid, but as far as like the
The
boss
story
mechanics,
is just a MacGuffin.
yes. What I'm trying to say is it's worth checking out. If you've listened to us and you are at all interested or curious, go with that, and it's worth checking out. I promise.
Well said. Cory, bring us home.
And thank you, Cory.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I can say that I haven't been saying for like a year now when I keep jokingly bring up that we should play this. This is just a favorite childhood title of mine. And I also was kind of surprised at how well it held up. Because, like I said, I haven't played this game in, I don't know, 18, 20 years or however long it's been since I've last like picked up a Sega Genesis. But it's still really well done, and the platforming's really good, and the graphics are really fun, and the music is really like, fitting and fast paced and enjoyable, and everything's just a wonderful like technicolor adventure time in McDonald's. And I think Sean was completely right when he said that if you put a different character into Ronald's place, you would probably have sold more copies.
Completely.
It's something that I would have probably played a lot more. If I had known about this back in the day, yeah, I probably would have gotten it if it wasn't McDonald's. But we've said that multiple times right now. Guys, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up the show?
No,
Well, I'm glad we played it again,
I am too. Thank you.
and if you do have a kid and you have some like weird thing where you want to share like retro things with your children, it's a very friendly title. There's nothing, bad about it. There's no profanity, there's no violence really, and even all the bosses, like Ronald makes friends with everybody. So it's really nothing bad to like show children, and it's just a very fun, friendly, like family fun time title.
I definitely need to get on the thank you train because Cory, this was something that I really enjoyed, and it was such a great break and pace from some of the more difficult games like Battletoads. God, that game was
Oh
so
God,
crushing.
yeah. I
Yeah,
thank you for mentioning that because going from that to this was the nice break that we needed in difficult games. Like, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So thank you, Sean.
And everyone out there, thank you for listening to us. Our next game is going to be The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the Game Boy Color, and the remake on the Nintendo Switch. So please check that out. Chris, Cory, as always, thank you guys so much. With that, thank you everyone out there. We've been Superannuated Starman.